Hi, Corinne. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you doing?
I am fantastic and I am excited that you are joining us today. I am absolutely a huge fan of the work that you're doing and the difference that you and your team are making across the world.
Well, thank you. And I'm, of course, a fan of the Purpose team as well, and all of the work that you guys are doing to infuse purpose in people's lives and in organizations.
Oh, thank you so much. And there's just so much synergy that we could talk about, but today I want people to get to know you and your work and the impact and truly what good looks like in the purpose space as it relates to the specific work that you do. And for those of you who are listening today, we're here with Corinne Graper, and she is the CEO and founder of the UpLift Agency, which is an absolutely incredible organization. And if you would just kind of take us through your story of how you even got into this space, what fueled your passion to do it, and then, of course, talk about what the UpLift Agency is.
Yeah, sure. So, I have always been driven to want to help other people, right? And so often we think of people who help as our nurses, our doctors, our teachers. Well, I was interested in business. And so I got into public relations and started working in corporate comms for some really big companies, right? But was very quickly drawn over to the other side of business and of organizations on the social responsibility side and really thinking about, well, how can business be a force for good? And so I started then transitioning from away from public relations into corporate social responsibility. And I've worked for several really large corporations, been fortunate with some amazing, incredibly talented, smart people in the space to launch a range of social impact and social responsibility programs. But it wasn't till about 4 years ago when I had this kind of aha moment, and I think so many of us have. I know, Davin, we've talked before, you had an aha moment, as well. I think a lot of good ideas come from those aha moments, and for me, it was really humbling. And so 4 years ago, I started consulting to the United Nations and was part of a small team that helped build out a new fund called the Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund, which supports grassroots local women's organizations in 25 countries that are in a state of crisis or conflict. And so I know you've got a big heart for the community. These are folks who are living in their communities that are in crises like Iraq, Bangladesh, Nigeria, Colombia, and they're really working from within to help pull their communities out of these crises and deal with humanitarian situations. And you can't start working in that space without it affecting you, right? And I started to realize that, these are the folks who have the solutions and the ideas and the knowledge to solve problems. But for so long, these aren't the folks that we've been seeking out to build our corporate strategies, right? So often we are building corporate strategies from a position of what makes sense for the brand, right? What feels good to the company, what makes sense for the brand, um, rather than what makes sense for the community.
Hmm.
And when I saw this disconnect, right, I saw these people in the community doing this amazing, incredible work that people didn't know about, that people weren't supporting. Um, and then I thought back to how when I was in corporate social responsibility, how I built strategies. I realized there was often a disconnect and that we can close that gap, and business can take its ability, its huge ability it has to transform and change this world. If it can create better strategies and better connect to those frontline leaders who have that really important knowledge, they can create better strategies to really create greater impact in the world. And so that was one of the things that really fueled me to create the agency, was really how can we drive more good and how can we start with strategy, because you gotta have the right strategy to really drive the changes in communities.
That's so good. And there's a lot of people that want to make a difference. And we talk about philanthropy, we talk about volunteering, but I love how something clicked. You had that aha moment, something clicked in your heart, and you said, we need to do more. There needs to be a more intentional strategy in terms of how the actual actions of an organization truly translate into impact all the way down to the front lines of people in these different countries around the world. And you really started kind of dissecting that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I was having conversations with companies as well, I was just realizing that there was such a thirst, that people who are in the CSR space, they have good hearts. They want to do good in the world. They've got into that space because they want to solve problems. But so many of us, like myself included, our backgrounds are marketing, human resources, public relations. We haven't spent 20 years working at a nonprofit that's serving the community. We haven't worked on human rights issues, right? And so we're trying to create really meaningful strategies, but we're going to be better at it when we can listen and learn and create things with our communities rather than doing things to or for the community. So it's really this idea of, how can we create this agency that provides new knowledge, insight, and partnerships and helps company really look at their business in a different way than they have before, so that we're creating strategies on the front end that can actually drive change in communities. And really, and it's ironic because I started in public relations, but really helping companies walk the talk.
That's so good. You said something there that was like, and it was that differentiation between doing something to or for a community versus doing something with a community, because that's really the key to sustainability. You could go in and you can do something to a community, you can do something for a community, but when you leave, a lot of that impact leaves with you. But you go and you do it with a community, and that's really where grassroots and sustainability takes place.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. And a lot of times I see is companies say, well, we've got the resources and the knowledge, so we'll come in and we'll build the program for the nonprofit, right? They're small, they don't have the resources, but what we miss is that they have this legacy of knowledge. They have networks into the community. And so it's really what we're really trying to do with the agency is come alongside companies and humble them, as I myself was humbled, right? I thought I knew, I thought I had a really good perspective into what was going on in the world. And it was only when I started working with people who were human rights defenders and who were on the front lines of change of some of the world's biggest issues that I realized I did not know what I thought I knew, right? And so we approach consulting humbly, which is perhaps a bit different, right? Usually you hire a consulting firm and they come in and say, we have all the answers and we're going to give you all the answers. We really try to come in as a humble partner and say, we know a lot and we care a lot, and we're going to figure this out together. And in one of the really important ways is making sure we're connecting in and tapping you into the frontline leaders who we want to listen to, we want to learn from, so that we're actually creating the strategies and the programs and the policies that are driving change.
And it truly is a we, it's not a you, right? There's a lot of people that when they start different types of programs and agencies like this, they're solopreneurs, it's them, they're a one-person consultant. But you've done a really nice job of building an agency with people who can approach this from a ton of different ways, humbly, and come in, offer different perspectives, but also ask really good questions to help companies arrive at shared solutions so that you're doing things with them. Yeah. Talk to us about, I'm really curious, where did the name UpLift come from? And how did you go about putting together such an incredible, purposeful team?
Yeah, so UpLift came from, ideating, but really the idea that we wanted to uplift business. So we want to uplift business to be its best for people and planet. And so often we use terms like empower and uplift for marginalized communities. And we kind of flipped it and said, we're going to uplift business and we're going to help business be better because it has so much potential to transform the world. If it starts to think not only, certainly, how do I become more strategic in my philanthropy and my volunteerism, but how, as a business, am I impacting the world through my operations? Like right now, what is our business doing and how does it impact a range of stakeholders, right? We need to start taking a stakeholder view to things. So how does it impact our employees? How does it impact the communities where we're at? How does it impact the environment, our supply chain, and human rights in our supply chain? And we need diversity, equity, inclusion. We need to be looking across those. And so in order to be able to actually look across all of those, what used to be kind of siloed areas in business, and work at an intersecting level, we have to have experts in those, right? I can't be an expert in anything, in everything. I can be an expert in some stuff, right? But I can't be an expert in everything. So I brought together a collective of experts who were like-minded, right? Who said the old system and ways of doing aren't really working for communities, right? We're centering on brand, we're centering on company, we should be centering on community. And so we have people who have backgrounds, in climate change, in gender equality, in affordable housing, in racial justice, in environmental assessments. And so we're bringing together people who have these deep subject matter in community issues, in humanitarian, aid and relief. We're bringing them together with the communicators and with the creatives, the people you would typically expect to find in an agency, so that we can really come alongside companies and help them look across their business and think about how do we integrate, leverage, and intersect these things and these strategies so that we are doing change that lasts and that's sustainable.
Change that lasts and that's sustainable. I love your answer to the uplift question, because so there's some people listening to this right now. They're probably like, well, wait a minute, isn't this the Finding Purpose Livecast? What is this? What does Finding Purpose have to do with CSR and Glow? And obviously there's some natural links, but if you really think about it, as Patrick Lencioni says, that the purpose of every organization is to improve the quality of human life in some way. And the more that you do that, the more that you improve the quality of human life across all of those spectrums that you just mentioned, the greater your purpose becomes. In essence, the greater your company becomes. So to kind of summarize what you just said, by you coming alongside with your team, with organizations, helping them think about their social impact differently and what they could be doing and how they're impacting humanity across the board by being more strategic, more intentional, more purposeful for doing that. Yes, they're uplifting others, but they're also uplifting themselves as a company, which is your mission.
Absolutely, because otherwise you're going to become irrelevant, right? Those companies will become irrelevant. And so there's tons of stats that you can look out there in terms of what consumers want, right? They want companies that are making green products. They want companies that are doing that in responsible ways. But your business is simply going to become irrelevant in the future. And people are going to choose to spend their dollars with a company that they feel is doing good in their community and doing good for people versus a company that they feel isn't giving back. And you see companies that are really at the forefront are thinking about how do we use our products, but also our people, and then how do we work in ways that are solving problems and are solving community problems. Our world has big problems, right? So we need to remove the superficiality from CSR that we've had at times. And we really need companies to get serious about what's the impact they have as an entity. You can't just give money out and you can't just get your employees to volunteer because you have an impact. We always say business is changing the world. It is. So businesses can choose to do it for good or for bad or somewhere in between. And oftentimes it's both at the same time, right? And so it's a journey. No company is perfect. It's just a matter of get on the journey, get on the path, and figure out how you can minimize harm and maximize good in the way that you work.
So good. So good. Now you keep talking about companies, and I know that there are some people that are in a position right now, obviously, to take what you're saying and say, wow, we really need to think differently about our company. There's other people that are listening to this that might be employees or leaders within the organization that this sounds all great, but I'm not really sure what it is that I can do. Talk to me about what types of companies do you work with, what sizes, how you approach those types of organizations.
Yeah. So, well, I would say for those employees that are watching, you can do something, right? You should expect more of your company. So, and I've seen it in the companies that we work with and we've consulted to. Employees speaking up, it moves the leaders. They want happy employees. They want employees that want to go to work, that feel good about the place that they work with, that feel proud of the products that come out. So, employees 100% can influence and help drive change, as can consumers as well. But we're also seeing that even in B2B. So there are more businesses for B2B companies. The companies that they want that they supply to are requiring them, right? And we're seeing governments are starting to regulate it more. Consumers are expecting it. Employees are demanding it, right? That companies are purposeful and responsible. And so I really think that employees do have a very important role to play in all of this. And Davin asked me that one question again, the last part you did, because I went all off on employees, but I forgot the last part.
That was really good. So I kind of planted that seed and you nailed it, because I want to make sure that people understand that, a lot of this movement, I'll come back to that question that you want me to re-ask you, but a lot of this movement really does start on the front lines with, people who, you shared this, actually, we were on a call yesterday
Mhm.
and with a whole bunch of different speakers with the Purpose Summit. And you had mentioned the power of the front lines of organizations who are really out there and actually seeing and feeling the major problems that are out there in the world that their company could come alongside
Mhm.
and do something with. And that's such a critical part. I mean, these are big. I don't want to name drop anybody. You can if
Yeah.
you,
No, no, no.
but I know that you're working with some really cool people, some really influential people who are really trying to tackle these worldwide issues from a grander scale. And all of those are happening because those people are feeling that individually. A lot of them aren't like major CEOs of companies. They just happen to have influence with, where they work or who they work or their status or whatever the case is. But it's near and dear to them. They see it and they want to do something about it. And I think that applies to each and every single one of us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we want to feel that in our lives, right? We want to feel our lives have meaning and have purpose. And we want to feel that the places where we work have meaning and purpose, right? We spend so much time at work that we want it to have a greater meaning and a greater good, right? And so we are seeing more and more CEOs are getting it. We have to build less business cases, right? But we do build business cases to say, why should you be conducting an environmental assessment, right? Why should you be looking at your philanthropy strategically? Why should you be assessing your supply chain and human? We do have to still build those business cases, but it's happening less and less. And the barriers to overcome that, because there's this general consensus coming out that business has to work in responsible ways and work in ways that give back and do good for society. A few things just as we get onto the employee piece, a few things as well that we see that I've seen troubling, and why I started the agency is because there's a lot of um, commitments that come out of the philanthropy and volunteer side of a business that necessarily aren't mirrored on the inside. And that's when we talk about, and I know what I'm going to be talking about at the Purpose Summit, right? Um, Beyond philanthropy and volunteerism, right? And those folks are doing great things and they're going out in the community. There have been companies, and one of the big impetuses and pushes for me to start the agency was that I saw a news article come out, and 4 companies, big, really, really big companies, um, who I was at a conference, and all 4 of these companies were on stage. They were held up as a great social responsibility company. Those 4 companies all give money in America to youth causes and child causes, and they're food companies, right? And so they're investing in the youth of America, and we can feel good about that and acknowledge that. Um, at the same time, those 4 companies got called out because they have child labor in their supply chain in Africa, right? So we can't say one side of the house is going to give to charities and support youth issues in America and say it's okay, though, that we haven't addressed supply chain issues around cocoa in Africa, right? If we're going to be a socially responsible company, we got to do both of this. We got to do all of it. And so that's one of the things that pushed me with the agency was it's not okay just to do this. We've got to look across the business at all of the impacts it has. And with equal commitment and passion, we've got to invest in social responsibility. You know, so many in business, we have this culture of innovation, right? We want innovative products. We want to be big and bold with the products that we come out to market with. We've got to be big and bold with our social responsibility. We can't be afraid to step up and say, we might have to take a little bit of a loss to fix some of these problems that are impacting human rights overseas, right? We might have to switch suppliers because that truly is the right thing to do.
Yeah. You know, as you were saying that, a new thought went into my head, and I'm not actually sure how you're going to receive this. You might say, Davin, don't ever say that again. But I'm almost, the more that I'm thinking about this, I don't even like the phrase corporate social responsibility.
Yeah.
I just, because responsibility is such a have to do word, right? Responsibility is like, well, I have to do this. Not we get to do this. Not I want to do this. Not look at the amazing impact that we can have today. Responsibility is like, no, I got to do that. And so it's like this checkbox that our companies like, it's CSR, we got to do that. And that's not really, first of all, I mean, that's kind of like, you know, that's just cost of entry. But the other piece is it's not also not very motivating. Coming back to the employee piece again, think about if you work for an organization, and what if we changed corporate social responsibility to corporate social possibility, right? Think about what's possible. Not, okay, what can we just do? What are we responsible for? How can we make a small difference and say, yep, we did that? No. Like, let's take a look, let's undress and take a look at every aspect of our business. Where can we seriously make a difference and make change that impacts every level of how we operate within our business, across our world, across all these lines? What's possible? I mean, if more companies ask that, what's possible? What is our social possibility? And how do we rally our leaders and our team around that for greater global impact?
All right. So first of all, I'm going to steal that from you because I think that's great. So I'm going to steal that from you. But no, you're right. And it's that lens. That's what we help our clients. And that's what we need. We all need to be taking this lens, right? Of like, what's possible. It's not just about philanthropy and volunteer. Those are important. And it's not just about how you impact, it's how you could impact, right? And putting those glasses on and that framework and that mindset on to think about, you know, how could we provide pathways to employment for people who are in, you know, low income situations, or people who are coming out from difficult situations, whether it's domestic violence situations, or whether, you know, they've had issues with justice and they're trying to come out and they're trying to get jobs and they're trying to get back on their feet. Like there's 1,000 ways that we can look at and business could be leveraged for good. Now, I will say around CSR, there's a whole debate in our industry around that. I simply say that because it's what most people know, but certainly we can debate around, you know, sustainability, ESG, you know, I'm using those interchangeably. And the nuances, you can get into nuances around them for sure. But I do like corporate social possibility as well. That's a nice positive way to look at it.
CSP, it's a brand new term that we just invented right here. You heard it here, folks. I can't wait for you guys to be championing that. That's awesome. No, but it really is that. And then we think about driving things within an org. And I want to caveat this because like a lot of times people are listening to this are like, yeah, how could we use purpose or use CSR or use CSP to better ourselves? And first of all, it's the wrong reason to do it. You should do it because, again, you get to do it. You want to do it. You're really focused on the impact piece and not using it as a tool to drive employee engagement and morale and recognition and accolades as a company. But the byproduct, if you think about this from a CSP, corporate social possibility standpoint, think about what that does for employee engagement. Think about what that does with employees asking deeper questions and fostering innovation and things that maybe they haven't thought about before. Think about what that does for teamwork. Think about that does for personal development. Think about what that does for organizational development. Just reframing the conversation in the way that it was always meant to be talked about from the beginning, getting back to the purpose of it, if you will, changes everything for the company and everyone that the company touches.
Yeah. And you said something about like, you know, don't do it for employee engagement. I'm actually okay with that. I'm okay to use it, to leverage it in strategic ways. And I'll tell you why in a second. But so I'm okay with use it, but don't only do things if they're going to benefit you. You also have to do things because as an ethical person, human being, you want to go to sleep at night. There are some things that aren't going to drive profit that you just should be doing. But I'm okay with use it and leverage it, because what happens then is it gets integrated throughout the company, right? If you're going to be intentional about how you approach sustainability and your ESG work, and you're going to weave it into your business to save costs, to reduce turnover, to build employee pride and engagement, and foster the sense of together, all of that stuff is great, and it does work and do those things. If you can do that, then those are less dollars that you have to put in rehiring more employees, right? Because they left because they're unhappy, because they don't feel a sense of culture and pride, right? Those are less dollars you have to put into advertising and marketing, because guess what? You're actually out in the community doing things. The community knows who you are and they want to work for you. So I'm okay with using it in that ways, because it means it's more dollars that your company can then start to allocate into things that are driving greater good in the world.
So it pays off. I mean,
Right.
as Richard Sheridan would say, run the experiment, right? I mean, literally approach this completely differently, because if you do, you will find not only is the ROI there, as many companies would
Hmm.
look at it, but it's there in so many different levels,
Yeah.
from whether that's retention or marketing savings and all of those things, that then you can then reinvest for greater good in the world.
Absolutely. And when you take a intersectional lens to all of these things, you can then maximize that, right? So many companies right now are investing in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, right? Now, they should be doing that. They should have been doing that all along, right, for their employees. But when they take that lens to their philanthropy and they look at how they're investing in communities with an equity lens, right, that they're going to maximize the amount of good that they can do. They're going to get to those frontline leaders, the people that have been working in that community for 25 years, that people haven't gotten behind, that is doing incredible transformational work, right? And so there's this historical lens to all of this stuff that we can really examine and say, we really need to take a step back and humble ourselves, and start to say, what don't I know? And like start from a position of what don't I know, and start talking and listening to community members, start engaging in content from an ESG perspective, a CSR perspective, to really open your minds. But I would say one of the things we're always encouraging of too is and the impact for the agency was bring the people that whose voices have historically not been heard in this space, bring them to the table and build your strategy from that. Because so often we talk to each other, we go to a CSR ESG conference, and it's just more corporations up on the stage, right? We need to talk to the person who's impacted by climate change, right? We need to talk to the person who's been impacted by human rights violations in supply chains, and what's their reality, and listen to that and build our strategies from there. uh, Honoring and recognizing the corporate piece and how we work, we've got to put those two things together. But the missing piece is the impact on the individual and on the communities that business is having and could have to solve real world problems.
So good. Approach everything from a standpoint of what don't I know, that curious mindset, that humble mindset that you started this conversation with when you started your company. You said, hey, I thought that I knew a lot about the space, and then I really found out how much I really didn't know. And you continue to approach each and every single organization that you work with kind of from that lens. And then the other piece, which is bring those voices which traditionally aren't heard at the table
Yeah.
to the table, so that you could hear how this is impacting truly the people that it is impacting, and how to approach this through their lens.
Yeah.
So powerful. And I know that as we're kind of wrapping up here on the back
Mhm.
end here with a few minutes left, you mentioned earlier, I'm excited that you're going to be speaking at the Purpose Summit in May. And you kind of spilled the beans on your talk, which I'm good with, which is beyond philanthropy and volunteerism. Give us just a little bit of a snapshot, as you know, May is still a couple months off. What does that mean? I know we went deep on a lot of that, but to the individual person right now, regardless of whether you're the CEO or you're a frontline employee or wherever you're at, what
Yeah.
does beyond philanthropy and volunteerism mean, and how can people make a difference right now?
Yeah, it's really taking that stakeholder perspective and that intersectional perspective. So at the summit, we're going to dig in more to that and define it. We're going to think and look at the lens of how our businesses impacting communities, impacting supply chains, impacting the environment. And we're going to give some examples of those so that people can leave and go back and think about their company and say, you know what, let's take another look at our environmental impact. Let's do an assessment and see what's the low hanging fruit that we can start to change, right? So we'll start to talk of what are some of the easy ways you can get started, because we work a lot with companies who are doing very little or haven't done anything yet around CSR. And we also work with companies that are that have a strategy and are trying to take it to the next level, right? Because we're a strategy firm. And sometimes it can be intimidating. It's where do you start, right? Because it's so huge. And so the thing is, you don't have to do it all at once, right? So we're going to be talking about how do you get started? And no matter where you are, how do you assess yourself? How do you define the future? And then how do you create a plan to get from where you are to where you want to be? And so we're going to talk about that more, honoring volunteerism and philanthropy, of course, because they're important, but looking at the other elements of how business impacts the world, how people can start to think about that and assess that and move their business along that continuum.
So good. So good. I thought of something else as you were just saying this. And again, you could say, Davin, don't ever say this again, or maybe it's something you can use. But the way that I'm imagining sitting in that session right now and having you speak. And I know that one thing that's been really transformational for me in our conversations is that, I personally always thought CSR really was just philanthropy and volunteerism. It was
Mhm.
giving either our money or our time, right?
Mhm.
Philanthropy, giving our money, um, you know, um, volunteerism, giving our time. But really, when it comes down to it, it's about giving your heart, and that's really how you are approaching this. This is beyond just giving your time or money to causes around the world. This is about giving your heart to the actual impact and change that can affect real human lives through small little changes that we might be able to make on an individual and organizational basis across the world.
Yeah, it's about hearts and minds, I would say, right? Because our world has big problems and business has a great opportunity to solve them. And so we need to get on it, right? The world needs business to get on it to help solve these challenges.
So good. So good. Oh, Corinne, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for taking the leap of faith that you did to jump fully into the work that you're doing, starting the UpLift Agency, really approaching this from a fresh set of lens, imploring us to give more than just our time and our money to making a greater difference around the world, to giving our hearts and minds, and for this work that you're championing. I know that there's countless lives that are being changed right now because of organizations you're working alongside with and communities that they're working alongside with and not to or for, and that impact is going to echo through generations long after our work here is done. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Davin. I enjoyed being, and I look forward to the Purpose Summit.
Can't wait. I cannot wait to hear that talk in May. And for those of you listening today, again, we're here with Corinne Graper. She is the founder and CEO of the UpLift Agency, and she will be speaking at the Purpose Summit in May on beyond philanthropy and volunteerism. And implore you to check out upliftagency.com, follow her on LinkedIn, and continue to challenge yourself. Ask
Mhm.
yourself, what don't I know? Approach
Mhm.
things from a position of humility and bring along those voices alongside of you that can help maybe give you a fresh perspective and help you affect change in a way that you didn't even think was possible. Corinne, thank you so much. Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time. We look forward to seeing you in May.
Yes, I look forward to being there.
Awesome. Till next time on the Finding Purpose Livecast.